our viewers, please let us know some of the attributes that really you had and that kind of stood you apart.
Well, that's a good question. I would say there was a lot of factionalism, a lot of fighting, tribalism that was going on in the party.
So, Michigan is clearly preparing for a new governor next year. Would you like to personally endorse any candidate, and why would that be?
The bylaws of the Michigan Republican Party says you absolutely have to stay out of the...
I wanted to ask you, what does President Trump personally means to you and for this nation?
I think he is a change agent that we're borrowing $2 trillion every year. And the economy has been doing fairly well. You usually go into deficit borrowing, and he said he's defunding the Department of Education. In the United States, whenever you siphon money through a bureaucracy, the bureaucracy takes...
So what are some of your priorities as a GOP chair, Senator Runstead?
Well, the first thing, we were left with quite a bit of debt.
How connected you are with the Indian community, and how do you plan to stay engaged with the Indian community?
Yeah, my interaction with the Indian community has been one of the so many of these entrepreneurs said, I got away from India because...
Good morning, Senator Runstead. Welcome to Gold Media.
Good morning. Glad to be on.
We are excited to talk to you today, and thank you so much for joining our podcast. So congratulations on your win for being the chair for GOP chair. We are super excited. I have personally attended all your debates, so I know exactly what your agendas are. But for our viewers, please let us know some of the attributes that really you had and that kind of stood you apart.
Well, that's a good question. I would say when I began this, part of the desire I had was to make sure that we unified the party. There was a lot of factionalism, a lot of fighting, tribalism that was going on in the party. And I came from a background of not having engaged in any of this factional fighting. And that's something I talked about. And I think it really resonated with the delegates because I said, I've never attacked anyone in any faction of the party. And they seemed to like that because there was a lot of people who had been really picking sides. And so one side was angry over this or the other side. And I stayed out of all of that. I also talked about not attacking the former chairs of the party. There was a lot of division. Some people really disliked the previous chairman, and another group really disliked the chairman just before him. And so there was these divisions there, and I stayed out of that, said I'm not going to attack either one of them. And same thing with the donors. There's a lot of people that didn't like specific donors. Well, I've never attacked any of the donors, and I said I'm not going to attack any of the donors. So I would say being somebody who you can appeal to everybody because you haven't been dropping bombs all over the place, and saying your goal is to unify the party was a message that resonated with the delegates. So I would say my personality of trying to avoid these conflicts within the party was very beneficial in the run.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Senator Runstead. So Michigan is clearly preparing for a new governor next year. Would you like to personally endorse any candidate, and why would that be?
Well, there's probably in just about every race, I or anyone in my position would have a favorite. But the bylaws of the Michigan Republican Party says you absolutely have to stay out of the primaries. Because what happens is when you have somebody get elected in a position like this and they start weighing in on a primary, they can really make a difference to help or hurt candidates. And so it's one of the most strong bylaws we have is you cannot, as the chairman, get involved with the primary. So it's my obligation to be neutral with these candidates until the primary is over. And then it's my job as the chairman to fight for that candidate with everything I've got to make sure that we defeat the Democrat candidate. But there's a number of names that have been floated that I think will be running. Mike Cox is one. John James is another one. I've heard Kevin Rinke. There's probably, I'm guessing, when it's said and done, there's going to probably be at least a half dozen or maybe more that will be running for that position. So it's going to be a very competitive, at least on the Republican side, primary.
Absolutely. And we are looking forward to that. So this January, we welcome the Trump administration. And I wanted to ask you, what does President Trump personally means to you and for this nation?
I think he is a change agent that we desperately need in the United States. And I don't know how many people will be seeing this maybe around the world, but we're borrowing $2 trillion every year, maybe even more than $2 trillion a year.
Yeah.
That's a trillion's 100 billion. And that's borrowed. That's not what we're spending. We're spending, I think it's like 3 trillion, and then we're borrowing another 2 trillion. We're spending even more than that. But to borrow 2 trillion a year, and I think we now have a total debt in the range of about 35 or 36 trillion as a percent of GDP. This has never been done. Even after World War II, that was the highest GDP to debt we've ever had, and that was in, I believe, 1946, trying to pay off World War II. Here, there is no gigantic war we're engaged in where we're trying to, survive a world war, and the economy has been doing fairly well. You usually go under deficit borrowing in a monstrous recession to try to pump the economy. Well, none of that's happening. There's just a will among the government to just spend and borrow and spend. It's what they do. They're like a newborn baby. They just eat and eat and eat and eat and never wants to stop. And that's what we're facing. So the president has said, the end. We're not going to bankrupt the country, because what happens with this deficit spending is that eventually you get inflation, and that's what was causing our inflation was Biden and the Democrats' massive spending, borrowing and spending. And if we don't get it under control, what will happen? You have massive inflation. Eventually, the dollar has no value. You might have $1 million worth of savings, and then you wake up one day and you can't buy an egg with the $1 million because it's worthless. That's what happens if you do not control inflation. So he's using the Doge approach. First and foremost, let's cut the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I just love yesterday, he said he's defunding the Department of Education. In the United States, we used to have the states and the locals did the education, and we had some of the best educational outcomes in the world. Well, in 1979, the federal government usurped it all. They took the entire thing and have spent now $3 trillion since 1979 with no increase in test scores. In fact, our scores are now way underperforming the rest of the industrialized world. So taking the money from these bureaucrats, many have never been in a classroom, they're just academic Ivy Tower types, taking the money from them and giving it to the local states and local schools is a huge increase in what we're going to be able to do in improving education, along with saving money. Whenever you siphon money through a bureaucracy, the bureaucracy takes the majority of the money. All the giant salaries, and they'll just keep hiring and hiring their friends and their family members. And so this is an example of what's happening in the United States to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's very exciting.
Absolutely. So what are some of your priorities as a GOP chair, Senator Runstead?
Well, the first thing, we're left with quite a bit of debt, more than more than I thought. Um, and very little cash on hand, and I mean very little. So writing the financial ship is the job one, and that's what I've been spending most of my time on. When I was running for this position, you have to engage 7,000 what are called precinct delegates around the state. Every county has an allocation of precinct delegates, so they're spread all over the state of Michigan, and you have to go appeal to them, and then a month before the convention, they will elect in their counties 2,000 state delegates who will go and vote at the state delegation. So I have started now 5 months ago, going out 7 days a week, 14-hour days, maybe 2, 3, 4 events a day in all over this. So it was an incredible endeavor. And then once I got done with that, I thought, well, I've won, so at least I could take a breather. Oh, no breather. It's been 7 days a week, 14, 16 hours a day for the last month to try to make sure that we get everything done and that we don't drop the ball on anything. So as soon as we get the financial ship righted, we get the right people in place, because we had virtually no employees that we were left with, we will then turn to setting up a complete apparatus to make sure that we win campaigns. And that's going to mean training individuals how to be a good volunteer. We're going to be doing training on candidate recruitment for the candidates who think they may want to run. We'll be doing campaign school for them, for their treasurers, for their campaign managers, their volunteers. So it's a huge endeavor now to start recruiting candidates and start training people so that when it gets closer to the deadline, we have a huge number of candidates in all the different races from school board on up that are trained and ready to go. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. We're also going to be doing work on election integrity. You don't do that the week before the election. You do that all the way through to make sure that there's no mischief, and we do expect mischief. That you've got to thwart that by early work. So that's kind of the main goals.
Absolutely. And then how connected you are with the Indian community, and how do you plan to stay engaged with the Indian community?
My interaction with the Indian community has been one of the greatest things for me as an elected official. So now about 7 years ago, I went from a very non-diverse district. It was probably 97, 98% white community. And the district that I ran for, the Senate district, was the most diverse district in the state of Michigan. So I had a tremendous amount of diversity. So when I won, one of the first things I wanted to do was get connected to the communities that I was not as familiar with. I have a great relationship with the Chaldean community all the way back now 11 years ago. And I really wanted to connect to the Indian community. So I started meeting some of the individuals. It's humorous when I found out I have this really large Indian community. I went to the state party website for the Republican Party, and they had 3 names on there as contacts for the Indian community. And so I called all 3 of the numbers, and 2 of them didn't work. And the other guy, he said, I haven't lived in Michigan for 10 years. I was like, so for 10 years, we've had these names on numbers that
No one reached out to.
yeah, no one's ever followed up on. So anyway, I started doing all of my own work in the community. And I remember my first meeting was, I think it was called Indian Flavors. It was a restaurant.
Absolutely.
And I just invited, and they invited a lot of people. So we had a great meal. That was the first time when I met almost all of these, like I said, it was 6, 7 years ago. And then that core really became some of my very, very good friends. Of all of them, the one that I closely connected to was Sonny Reddy. I
Yeah,
don't know if you know Sonny, but
absolutely. Yeah.
he is amazing. He and I have been to so many things. He would call me like once a week, Jim, you got to come to here. You got to come here. And I said, okay, I'll be there.
I'll be there.
And I would go to these events, and I remember this huge outdoor event that we went to, and it had beautiful lighting brought in. It was kind of like at dusk, and there was music and everything. And Sonny was talking to somebody, and I was talking to one of the organizers, and I said, "This lighting is beautiful." He goes, "Yes, Sonny already paid for that. Sonny already, And so I go to so many things. Sonny already paid for that. So he's very generous,
Generous. He
and
is. Yeah.
yeah, and he doesn't ever tell you. You find out through somebody else that he paid
Right.
for it. So anyway, he and many others started inviting me to so many Indian events. I've been at Bollywood dance house for an entire Sunday watching dance routines. I have been
Yeah.
in Diwali, more Diwali events that I can remember. We've had big meetings at Temple, the SV Temple in Novi, where all of the Indian leaders would come in and we just have a discussion about what is the values of the Indian community and how do they overlap with Republican values. And it was great because we quickly realized that in the Indian community, the values they share with the Republicans is almost every single value.
Right.
The community does not like the idea of boys coming in the girl shower. They do not like back then when there's all this defund the police. They were saying that's insane. We've worked all our lives to build a big, beautiful home in a nice neighborhood, and then you get rid of the police, and anyone can come in and rob us. I mean, this is insane. So there was so many other connections. I would say the Indian community is some of the most entrepreneurial in the United States, way more than the average American. The number of Indians that own IT businesses, own medical businesses, engineering businesses. So the idea that they are going to get taxed and regulated, so many of these entrepreneurs said, I got away from India because I was going through that. And it was interesting. I heard over and over again that in some little village, the lowest level politician is more powerful than the richest man in the whole region because the way the rules are written, that low level politician has control over the business community. They can say you can and cannot do things. And they so many times I heard, wow, you're a senator and I could talk to you. In India, I couldn't talk to the dog catcher because he's so powerful that you'd have to bow down to the lowest level guy.
Right.
And they wanted to get away from that. They wanted to have economic freedom that I heard over and over. I could never do in India what I have done in the United States. And I said, that's an example of what we want to keep. We do not want to tax your business till you cannot run it. We don't want to regulate it till you have to give it up. That's the stuff you were dealing with in India. We want to make sure that we are giving you the opportunity to grow and achieve as much as you can. You're employing people. That's how people get employed. Almost
Right.
all the people get employed by business, usually small business in America.
Right.
So anyway, we talked about all of these things. So I put together a flyer, and the flyer has all of our shared values between the Indian community and the Republicans. I think I printed 10,000 of those out, and we got rid of, handed out more than half of them already. Just at the India Day in Novi, I don't know if you've been to that, but
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
about 20,000 Indians come through there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have a great opportunity to really get the message out. I've spoke at India Day and just have had a great time. All my experience in the Indian community, all of them have been wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much, Senator Runstead, for the opportunity to connect with Gold Media. Absolutely loved talking to you, enjoyed talking to you. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gold Media viewers. Make sure and subscribe to the podcast.